My name is Kalle Slaap, watchmaker in the Netherlands, and you're watching Live Watchmaking. I just introduced Omega Dirty Dozen. As you know, I don't do any work up front. Maybe with this information we can find out where it was issued. I put it in the description in a moment, so maybe you can help us, somebody can help us trace the provenance of this beautiful Dirty Dozen. All looks beautiful and original. Serial number on Omega. The first two numbers are a code for the production year, and if I'm not mistaken, the 10 represents 1944, so it's a later issue Dirty Dozen. 12 brands were supplying the troops with army timepieces. So this is the Omega variant. And here we see the timing pins, and they are completely pushed to the outer limit of retard, so making it run slow. So we know it was running fast. Deduction. So in a moment we have a look at the hairspring, the balance spring, and probably it is sticking or a bit to one side, and that's the reason why it was running fast. So let's have a look. Let's stop the balance wheel, because there we have the temperature compensated balance wheel. A Breguet overcoil for the balance spring. The balance spring is blued carbon steel, so there is use for the temperature compensated balance wheel. Still a miracle to join those two materials together. Is it me, or is there... Hey, look at that! It seems that the ruby for the pallet fork is way too big. Do you see that? It seems like the pivot of the pallet fork is just on one side. There's way too much play. We check in a moment when we do the disassembly, but at first glance it seems that the pivot is way too small for this jewel. Even though it's army issue, it is still beautifully finished. I love that. Inner ring. These lips are pushing down the movement when the case back is screwed on, and that's why you see always with these timepieces, you see there's some markings. Do you see that going round? And that is simply from here, these tips touching the case back and pushing it together. What a lovely piece. And because that ring is pushing down the movement, and they're pushing on the dial, these screws aren't necessary, but because there's no inner ring that it is pushing down, it's just a different solution. So these and that one aren't necessary, so they shouldn't be in there. Have a look at the pivot for the pallet fork. There's a slight movement of that pivot, but not extreme, but you see it going a bit like that. Only two possibilities. The pivot is mushroom shaped, so it's becoming smaller and there's play, or the jewel, the inner hole, is too big. Just remove the power from the ratchet wheel with the click. Winding stem, and what do we have? Some excess oil, but no dipstick yet. We'll have a look. Cheers everybody, lovely. Have to be careful with these hands because they might be radioactive. Here, the lume is going over the front, like here, it's really unusual. But then again, maybe I can see from the back. Yeah, I'm not sure. My first impression is it looks a bit messy. But then again, it's a wartime timepiece. Thank God, no glue or horribleness. Ah, look at that. You don't have to be a watchmaker to enjoy the beauty of the finish. Even though it's a wartime piece, look at that, the machining. And, important, vintage Omegas don't have that circular spring down there. So it isn't missing, it shouldn't be there. I love the philosophy that they say if the machining is just right, there is hardly any play between the hour wheel and its driving wheel. So you don't need to push it down with a small spring between the dial and the hour wheel. If the machining is just right, you don't have to push it down. It's beautiful. Ooh, that is a lot. That is way too much. So I just removed the cannon pinion. That is just simply too much fiber. Look at that. That is way too much play. Oh wow. In end shake and in side shake. Interesting. This is just usual for older watches. Okay, it is a bit excessive, but still it is the setting lever spring. That is some dried up grease, and this seems to be oil instead of grease, but we'll have a look. We'll clean it anyway. And you see here 2 notches. If it, of course, if it had a date, it probably had 3, but it hasn't. We have to be extremely careful because of that tiny pivot. So I like to remove the spring first, and then the yoke and the yoke spring, so we don't have to put it the other way around. And we do, but in a holder. Here we are, and otherwise we would jeopardize that tiny pivot, and we really don't want to do that. Yoke spring is always tricky. There we go. Because you want to release the power but not scratch the surface underneath. There we go. Ooh, look at that. That is excessive. The dial side is completely disassembled. Now it's in the holder, so the pivot is protected.